Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Church of Christ, and I teach theology. This is a podcast on the Starcast Production Network at sqpn.com. Today, we are on day 102, recovering Orientalum Ecclesiarum 19-23 on each rite having control over their own liturgy. It's really a few different things, and that's one of the things. But if you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we talked about liturgical aspects like confession, the permanent diaconate, and marriage in the East. Today, we're going to talk about a few aspects of divine worship like feast days, Easter especially, and family unity. So if you have a mixed rite family and things like that. And this is the whole section on divine worship in the document. This section is just called that, and we're covering the entire section today. So we're going to start with paragraph 19, which is on the feast days in the Eastern churches. It belongs only to an ecumenical council of the Apostolic See to determine, transfer, or suppress feast days common to all the Eastern churches. On the other hand, to determine, transfer, or suppress the feast days of any individual churches is within the competence not only of the Apostolic See, but also the Patriarchal or Archiepiscopal Synod, due regard being had to the whole area and the other individual churches. So, this is pretty straightforward, that they each have control of their own feast days. So the Ukrainian Catholics and the Chaldean Catholics, they can determine their own in their own episcopal or or patriarchal synods. That's fine. The Pope can also override and say you have this feast day, although he's not prone to do that. If they're going to change it for the entire Eastern Church, you need the Pope or a ecumenical council. But in general, most of the feast days are just left to each specific church to determine on their own. So paragraph 20 is on each church choosing an Easter date. And I want to give a little bit of background for this. So at the time of Jesus, right around that time, Julius Caesar made a calendar generally called the Julian calendar. And that was the calendar of the church for the first 1400 years or so. And that calendar is pretty accurate. Even today, when we have the Gregorian calendar, you think of the Julian calendar, you think it's the same thing, but it's not. So the Julian calendar, the old one, would have February 29th every fourth year. And that's pretty good. It assumes that there's 365.25 days per year. But it's actually 365.24, etc. I forget the exact number. And so it's off by like one day every 120 years or so. So in, I think, the 1500s, Gregory the 13th, the astronomers in the Vatican noted that, hey, it's supposed to be the equinox and it's off by so many days. And so they deleted Gregory the 13th deleted a few days in October to bring the calendar back in line with what it was, so that, the date that we say is the equinox is actually the equinox and the solstices, right? And so what the Gregorian calendar does is that every 4 years, you have February 29th, unless it's divisible by 100, in which case you don't have February 29th. But then you're like, wait a second, 2000, yeah. But unless it's divisible by 400, then you have February 29th again. And then since Gregory the 13th is to be added that unless then it's divisible by 4,000, then you don't have it again. And that should be accurate for, for 20, 50,000 years. That's well beyond a human lifetimes, right? And this was not accepted by Protestants, by the Orthodox at the time, right? So, for example, England didn't adopt it for a while because this was after the Protestant Reformation, and the Orthodox, many of them still follow the Julian calendar. And so, because that, the calculation for the date of Easter is off by a little bit, and things like that. But so the idea here, what this paragraph is going to say generally, is that the churches can choose to either follow the Gregorian or the Julian calendar for Easter. So let's read it. Until such time as all Christians are agreed on a feast day for the celebration of Easter, with a view, meantime, to promote a unity among the Christians in the same area or nation, it is left to the patriarchs and supreme authorities of a place to come to an agreement by unanimous consent and combined counsel of those affected to celebrate the feast of Easter on the same Sunday. That's it. So in general, out in the East, it's generally been the Julian calendar. It still is today. It's really interesting some of the ways that this happens. Recently, in the last few years, I forget the exact year, but the Ukrainian Orthodox and Ukrainian Catholics both switched Christmas to the Gregorian calendar, like at the same, like a month or two apart. And so it was really funny at the time because there was some article in the news saying, oh, like, Zelensky's like canceling Christmas for them. And it's just that two of the biggest churches in the country just switched Christmas from the beginning of January, what would be on the Julian calendar in our modern calendar, to the day that everybody else in the world celebrates. So the state just said, okay, well, if all the Christians are celebrating Christmas this day, this will be the day that's a holiday. And then you also have interesting things where in the Ukrainian Catholic churches in Western Canada, some follow the Julian, some follow the Gregorian calendar. I don't know if they still do. I know that was the case 10 years ago when I was there, with the Ukrainians in Ukraine switching to the Gregorian. I assume the Ukrainians in Canada are following suit as well. But this is the idea, right? So this is the idea of what we have here. So moving on to paragraph 21, it's about unity of the family and the local customs and how you work out in a family. If, say, you have a Chaldean Catholic and a Ukrainian Catholic, or a Maronite Catholic and a Roman Catholic get married, because that happens, right? I don't know about your Chaldean Ukrainian marriage, but I do know about the Maronite Roman marriage. Anyway, so let's read it. Individual faithful dwelling outside the area or territory of their own rite may follow completely established custom of the place where they live as regards to the law of sacred customs, the law of the sacred seasons. In families of mixed rites, permissible to observe the law according to one and the same rite. So, right, this is freedom to do it, right? So, for example, in the West, we have the similar law as far as traveling. Like, for example, in the U.S., Nebraska and Philadelphia and northeast of it celebrate Ascension Thursday as a holy day of obligation. Now, if you're a traveling agent somewhere else in the U.S. and they're on Ascension Thursday, you don't have to oblige it, because the lesser of the two laws obliges, right? So you're not obliged if, say, somebody who lives in Atlanta was up in Philadelphia for a business meeting on Ascension Thursday, they're not obliged to go to Ascension Thursday Mass. Still good to do, but it's not obligation. Or if somebody in Philadelphia is in Atlanta on a business meeting, the same thing. But anyway, so that's an example. And here they're saying, hey, you can follow the customs of wherever you are as far as liturgical seasons, or you can follow it in your mixed rite at home, right, in a family. And so that's, I actually have here the story I was going to say about the Ukrainians in Canada as a note here. I got a little ahead, right? And this idea of the family being united in what they celebrate. So they all celebrate the same rite, even if there are slight differences between the two as far as like fasting rules or things like that. So let's move on to paragraph 22 is basically it's just follow the divine office in your own right. Divine office, remember, is like liturgy of the hours, briefly it's the priest. The prayer the priests pray on their own, but as Father Shabba mentioned, some of the Eastern rites integrate it more directly into the liturgy than we tend to in the Roman rite. So let's read it. Eastern clerics and religious who celebrate in accordance with the prescription, the tradition of their own established custom, the divine office, which from ancient times has been held in high honor in all Eastern churches. The faithful, too, should follow the example of their forebearers and assist devoutly as occasion allows in the divine office. So that's right? So this is, very straightforward. The divine office varies by rite. It's linked with each rite. For example, I went to Holy Transfiguration Monastery here in California, Ukrainian Catholic monastery. I was there for a few days, and they celebrate according to the Ukrainian Catholic rite, and they just say, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, many times. In a number of times, much more than we are used to saying, repeating in the Roman Catholic divine liturgy hours. And that's fine. There's different variations, right? And this is also encouraging the laity to pray them, right? We talked about that in Sacrosanctum Concilium about the Latin rite, but this also applies to the other rites as well. So let's read paragraph 23, which is basically saying, hey, the patriarch or major archbishop of each rite has the authority to regulate the liturgy. So let's read it. It belongs to the patriarch with his synod, or to the supreme authority of each church with the council of the hierarchs, to regulate the use of language in the sacred liturgy functions, and after reference to the Holy See, of approving text, translation of text into vernacular, right? So this is letting them do themselves, this idea of de-Latinization. They're still asked to double-check translations. I think there's a value in having, let's say we have the same text in the original, or we're citing the same Bible verse in the Roman and say like the Chaldean right in the U.S., then we translate that the same way, even if there is different ways to translate it in English. And I think that's what the Vatican would be concerned about, not about is this, very few of them probably know the languages well enough to do that. But Anyways, so thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest produce it. Another great podcast, sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue on the next paragraphs of Orientalium Ecclesiarum, 24 to 26, on the union of Eastern rites in the liturgy. And please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, for Vatican II, which provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information, like reading lists, a reading plan, or a playlist for individual documents, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X. There's also an SQPN Discord server with a channel for Vatican II in the Year at sqpn.com/Discord, and I'm on there usually at least once a week to check up on it if anybody has any questions.
Amen.